UFC Columbus is almost here. I'm going to give you my final picks. We're going to look at some strategy for this card, and we're going to build some lineups, so make sure you watch until the end. You can call me Kunith. Let's make some money this week. If you haven't yet, go back and watch the video from earlier in the week. That's going to give you a good base of information and a good starting point for this video where we are absolutely going to dominate. We have to hit the parlays. We have to hit the props. We have to cash our DraftKings lineups. We got to hit the over-under on our different apps that we use. We have to do it all this week. And dare I say, I think I have the formula. I think I know what needs to be done to get the job done this week. And now for this final picks video, we're going to talk about any changes that have been made. We're going to talk about value plays, strategy, and we're going to build some lineups. Now the first change that we had to the slate, which we've had this fight all week, I don't know why it wasn't already here. All the way up at 9,300, we have the Black Wolf Aliaskhab Khizriev. He's fighting Denis Tiuliulin this week. Now many of you might not know who Aliaskhab Khizriev is, but let me tell you, at 9,300, I'm definitely putting him into my lineups this week. He's making his UFC debut, but this is kind of a long time coming for this guy. He probably should have been in the UFC before this, and I'm excited to see what he does in his time here. He's 31 years old, so he's right in his fighting prime, and I think that he's going to make a big impression this weekend. When you look at the run he's been on recently outside of the UFC, he's not only finishing guys, but he's finishing guys inside the first minute. We could totally see that here. We saw 2 quick win finishes last week that scored a lot of points and showed up on the optimal lineup. There's a chance that the ceiling is really high for Khizriev because he might be able to pull off that quick win for you. And now having Khizriev on the slate, finding out how much he's priced, I think it makes it impossible to play McMann Fiora with any confidence this week. And I want to talk about this again because we did talk about this a little bit in the last video, but McMann Fiora at 9,400 on a slate where a lot of the underdogs don't look good seems unplayable. We have Curtis Blaydes down here at 9,200. He has the highest fantasy ceiling out of maybe any fighter on the roster, so it'd really be crazy to pay for anything more than him on this slate. But when you look at the matchup that Khizriev has, it does make sense to play him as well. But McMann Fiora, absolutely not. She's probably going to win a decision, score 89 points, 90 points. And when you look at what Khizriev can do, when you look at what Blaydes has 25 minutes to potentially do, there's no way that I'm going to get to her as opposed to these two gentlemen. Now, there are 13 fights on this card, so there are a lot of things that you can do with your lineup, and there are a lot of ways for you to get different. But it's going to be a little bit difficult to do that considering, again, what the underdogs look like this week. You guys know me by now. I'm Mr. All Dogs Go to Heaven. I will back an underdog or 2 or 3 or 4, maybe 5. But this week, it's looking grim below 8,000 to tell you the truth, but I will still go over my value plays with you. There really aren't that many. Our first value play can be found at 7,800 in the form of Matthews Nicolau. He's fighting David Dvorak, who is unbeaten in the UFC, but I do like Nicolau this week. I really like the grappling from Matthews Nicolau to win him this fight. And like we talked about earlier in the week, when you look at how he was able to control Tim Elliott, who is as slippery as a bar of soap covered in olive oil, one would hope that he can grapple effectively here against David Dvorak. Another reason I like Nicolau this week is because Dvorak, while he's crisp and technical, it may be difficult for him to fight from behind if he loses the first round in this fight. I would be surprised if either fighter found the finish in this spot, so I do expect it to go the whole 15 minutes, and I do expect the fantasy points to be relatively low coming from this fight. You see here Matthews Nicolau winning fights, scoring 50, 70, 70 points. This is totally possible this week, and you still might need him in your lineup. And the reason why I say that is because 6 winners are going to be hard to come by this week with the way that the pricing is and with the way that the underdogs look. But Matthews Nicolau at 7,800, I really like him this week. Next, and this one might surprise you here, at 7,500, I'm looking at Marc Diakese. And hear me when I say this, you may not even play Marc Diakese this week, but you still may use him. I say that because when you look at this fight initially, it is easy to think, and I think many people are going to think, oh, Viacheslav Borschev by knockout. But Marc Diakese in this weight class isn't just somebody who gets knocked out. He's never been knocked out in his career, and he's only been knocked down once in his UFC career in a fight against Nasrat Haqparast. In Borshev's last fight, he was making his UFC debut against a short-notice Dakota Bush, where there isn't really a huge gap in experience between the two fighters. Diakese is 5-5 in the UFC, and he's faced the likes of Dan Hooker and Rafael Fiziev, who was going to headline a fight night card earlier this year. So despite the mixed results, he has great experience and obviously a lot more than Viacheslav Borschev. So this brings me back to the idea of not playing him in your lineup, but still using him in your lineup. And Marc Diakese is a pawn in the chess game that we're playing with this slate this week. And if you're familiar with chess, you know that a pawn is used to draw out a big old piece on the other side. I think a lot of the field is going to be looking to play Viacheslav Borschev, looking for that first round knockout upside, but expect Marc Diakese to stay in this fight, wrestle in spots, and manage distance well. He's an athletic dude. He's only 29 years old. He's been doing this for a while. I expect this fight to be closer than what a lot of people are hoping for. Now, do I think he wins? No, I don't. I don't think he wins. I think Borschev has the bigger moments, lands the harder strikes, and is moving forward for more of the rounds. I think those are going to be the factors that win Borschev this fight. But I think this is where we start to see the limitations in Borshev's game, because he's not going to be looking to grapple in this spot. So if he just wins a decision based on striking and he doesn't throw that many strikes and maybe he gets tired later in this fight, he's not going to score you that many Draftkings points up at 8,700. And so Marc Diakese, the more that I look at this, the more that I realize he's going to give Viacheslav Borschev a fight. He's not just going to roll over the way Dakota Bush did. So we're going to use him this week by just understanding what he's capable of and understanding the fight he's going to bring to Borschev, and avoiding Borschev on Draftkings, because at 8,700, he might score you 78 points. Now, I'm going to share my next value play with you in just a second, but before I do, you thought I missed an edit? No, I was just giving you a few seconds to subscribe, and if you haven't, I'll give you another few seconds. Good work. Now for our next value play at 7,100, we are playing Joanne Wood this week. Now let me explain to you how I got here. On my own time, I was making a parlay and I decided what would the odds look like if I decided to parlay all three of the women's MMA fights on this card. So I start with Manon Fiorot for obvious reasons. I'm all over Karol Rosa this week, so I plugged her in. And then I plugged in the co-main event favorite in Aleksei Grasso. So I'm looking at this parlay and I'm thinking, women's MMA? All three favorites cashing? Probably not going to happen. So then I look at the parlay and realize, okay, we have to swap one of these ladies out. So we start doing the work backward. Well, you look at Manon Fiorot and her matchup, I don't think a short notice Jennifer Maia is going to give her much trouble. I don't think the 41-year-old Sara McMann is going to have anything to offer Karol Rosa on the feet. And then I get to Aleksei Grasso and realize that she has the worst matchup of the three. And an over-under game that I play on a different app has Aleksei Grasso's line for significant strikes set at 79.5. Now, the people who make these lines are pretty sharp, so they're probably going to get it right, and she's probably going to come in maybe 5 strikes under or 5 strikes over that number. So then I ask myself, in a striker's matchup, you have Aleksei Grasso, who doesn't have much power, never recorded a finish inside the UFC, and if she does land around 80 strikes in this fight, then she probably loses based on volume. Just look at what Joanne Wood has done in her UFC career in the last few years. She loses in the first round to Talia Santos. Now this fight's probably going to go to decision, so we'll look at all of her decision fights. Loses a split decision to Lauren Murphy that she could have won. You could have made the case that she won. 153 strikes thrown, 123 strikes landed. Now, Lauren Murphy and Talia Santos, these are the biggest, strongest fighters in the division. No real shame in losing these two. And Lauren Murphy, again, you could have made the case that Wood took that. Jessica Eye, she's experienced. She's not great, but she has decent size for the division. And she put up Max Holloway numbers on her, throwing over 200 strikes, landing almost 150, and scoring 108 points in a fight that lasted 3 rounds, and she only secured 1 takedown for less than 20 seconds of total control time. So this just speaks to the upside that Joanne Wood has even inside a 3-round period. If we take away the submission in the first round from Jennifer Maia and you look back at her decisions again, you have 150 strikes against Andrea Lee. She loses a decision to Katlyn Chookagian and scores 70 Draftkings points in 3 rounds. That's the kind of number that you would want from somebody that you're stacking in a 5-round fight, let alone doing it as a loser in a 3-round fight. And if she gets the nod in that contest, then she scored you 100 points. And then if you go down here, you see against Letourneau, against Courtney Casey, against Ham, just a ton of strikes being thrown. So you have to think, if she throws 150 strikes and lands about 120 of them on Aleksei Grasso, she's going to win this fight and she's going to score you over 90 DraftKings points, which will definitely put her on the winning lineup at this price. Even if she scores 80 points, you still might need her in your lineups this week, because if favorites clean up, then you're going to be stuck with a situation where the winning lineup isn't that high of a score. And one thing that's important is to not let UFC London cloud your judgment coming into this week. And what I mean by that is that was an outlier. That was a crazy fight card. There were 12 fights, 9 of them don't go the distance. And of the 3 that do go the distance, one was Jack Shore, where he ended up scoring like 106 points. Last week, you could have called 6 really good winners and still not had a great week because of the quick win finish from Makwan Amirkhani, quick win finish from Muhammad Makhachev, and a lot of first round finishes on the card. Just crazy performance from the fighters last week. But I think we're going to get back to normal this week. I think we're going to see at least half of these fights go the distance, if not more. And a lot of these fights that are going to go the distance, I don't really see either side scoring that many points. Like when you look, for example, I'll pull these back up. When you look at the fight with Saldana and Souza, I mean, look at what Souza did in his last fight. He scored 20 points in a 3-round loss, and this wasn't a fight that he was getting dominated in by any means. And then you look at Saldana, look at what he did in a win over 3 rounds, 54 points. And then 32 points in a loss. So if he won, he scored 62. I think you can expect that kind of performance from those 2 guys this week. So that's a fight that I'm staying away from. And now that I'm on the topic, I might as well start building lineups with you. And I'll also talk about what we need to do to be successful this week. Well, early in the week, when I was building lineups, the first thing that I was doing was going up to Curtis Blaydes. He's an absolute lock this week. Obviously, you can put him in your parlays as well. I do expect him to actually find the finish in this spot via ground and pound, and it might even be earlier than we think, maybe 2nd or 3rd round, ground and pound finish from our guy Curtis Razor Blaydes. But I definitely am going to be building my lineups around him. 100% exposure is what I'd recommend for the favorite this week. And earlier in the week, Khizriev wasn't here. I wasn't going to play Manon Fior if I was already playing Curtis Blaydes. Askarov has a tough matchup against Kai Kara-France this week, so his ceiling might be a little limited. Aleksei Grasso, I don't even expect her to win. And Karol Rosa, I think that she's somebody that you should have in your lineups as well because of that upside. And also, I think that she might get a finish late in this fight. It's just a situation where she throws so many strikes that if Sara McMann is gassed, there's no way that she's going to be able to sit there and handle that storm that's coming her way. So I like Karol Rosa at that price. Neil Magny by decision is the easiest prop bet of the week. I'm going to say that again. Neil Magny by decision is the easiest prop bet of the week. Go take that. Go take that or parlay that with something else, but it's just easy money. At the end of the fight, you're going to say, oh yeah, he was right. Neil Magny did win by decision. And you probably think the same thing, just make some money on it. But already, when you look at the average remaining salary, we're below 8,000. So I would like to come down here to kind of balance things out. And I really like Joanne Wood. And another reason I like Joanne Wood, now that I'm right here and I could show you, but I think a lot of people are going to be pressing this button this week with Kai Kara-France, and for good reason. His confidence is growing. He might have the hand speed and punching power advantage in this spot. I don't want to overblow the results that he's had recently against Cody Garbrandt. I mean, this is the outcome that Cody Garbrandt has been up against for the last couple of years. And then he's coming down to 125, so maybe his chin is a little compromised. So I don't want to put too much stock in him blowing the doors off Cody Garbrandt. And then Rogerio Bontorin, yes, he knocks him out during a weird, wild exchange in the first round, but this was also a fight that he was losing largely up until this point, and then he just found a really clean shot that was able to put Bontorin down. And again, he does have solid power for the division. Just look at the knockdowns that he's recording. He's got one against Brandon Royval, Marc De La Rosa. He's got another one down here. So you're looking at a situation where he's able to get knockdowns and he's able to throw hands for the whole 15 minutes. He has good cardio. But a big part of me does feel like Askarov is going to be able to out-grapple him this week. I think if you do take this fight, you could take Kai Kara-France by decision. I could totally see him winning a split decision, but I don't expect him to go out there and knock out Askarov, and I think the recency bias are going to cause a lot of people to click this button, and since he's priced right next to Joanne Wood, and it's women's MMA, good way to get different. Now we've got about 8,200 salary left on the table, so there are some more things that we need to do to save a little bit. I like Bryan Barberena at that 8,200 to 8,000 range. I don't think that you would be wrong to go either way in that matchup, but I really don't expect it to go the whole 15 minutes. Matt Brown is just not a guy who fights to a decision anymore. And yes, again, he went to decision with Carlos Condit, but outside of that, just look at how often he has lost or won by way of knockout. Now, he's probably going to be the better striker and the more talented fighter in this spot, but I don't know what his cardio is going to be like coming into the second round, especially if he has a big moment in the first and gasses out looking for the finish against Bryan Barberena. It's just one thing that's really scary. It just depends on who the referee is. Because if he throws everything at Barberena, there's a chance that Barberena could eat it and then come back in the second round and knock Matt Brown out. The tides can turn just like that. But if that vampire Chris Tognoni is the ref, he's going to jump in as soon as a 3-punch combo is landed. So you never really know. But it's just hard for me to trust Matt Brown at this age, considering what we've seen from him in the past. Really just, I mean, he's losing to higher level competition, sure. And you would think, like, if you had a Venn diagram of Diego Sanchez and Ben Saunders, I think Bryan Barberena would probably be somewhere in the center. And it's a home game for our guy, Matt Brown. He is the immortal. He was on the thumbnail last week, and whenever I put an old guy in the thumbnail, they win, like Jim Miller. I'm changing my mind here, brothers. I'm going to pick Matt Brown. I talked myself into Matt Brown just then. So let me put him in at 8,200, and we have 8,250 left. And this is where it starts to get dicey because I really don't want to play some of these people down here at these low prices. Jennifer Maia, I'm not really interested. Denis Tiuliulin, I'm not really interested. Daukaus, I'm not really interested. And really, I mean, you do end up having to play Kai Kara-France, right? Who's probably going to come in at 40% ownership just because. And then with that, you are able to get up to somebody like Khizriev, and you've left just 100 salary on the table. But now you're looking at 2 women's MMA fights. You're looking at 2 big underdogs as well. You're targeting that mid-range, which we need to this week. Now, to me, this is a solid lineup. The problem for me in this lineup is I don't really feel great about Kai Kara-France. I don't really feel great about Matt Brown. If I take those 2 out, what are we able to do? Well, we're left with 7,700. Listen, I know a lot of people are looking to play Aleksei Oleinik this week, just hoping for that submission upside, but I think that that fight is going to be severely disappointing. It's going to be difficult for him to wrap up anything over Ilir Latifi. Normally, you like to look at the shape that fighters are in, so when you look at what Latifi's bringing to the table, I think it's going to be difficult for Oleinik to really get anything off on him. And Latifi's a really experienced grappler in his own right, so if he finds top position, I don't think that he's going to make big mistakes that are going to allow Aleksei Oleinik to find something like an Ezekiel choke with no gi. It's crazy. Now, you could play somebody like Matthews Nicolau, but you're still stuck having to play one of these underdogs, and you're probably going to end up either landing on somebody like Marc Diakese for the big upset, or you're coming back down to Kai Kara-France and maybe changing something else. But again, this week you're looking for 6 winners. I think that it's going to be hard to build lineups with 6 winners if you're not targeting the fighters with maybe less upside. So instead of somebody like Khizriev, I think that I'd have to go with somebody like Neil Magny. Neil Magny by decision, again, is the safest prop bet this week. And now with 1,000 left on the salary, I can change some things about my lineup. Like, for example, if you take both of those out, you could end up playing somebody like Chris Gutierrez, who might be a sleeper this week. And then you could play the Matt Brown, Bryan Barberena fight one way or the other. And I think Chris Gutierrez has as good of a chance as winning as any of these other underdogs here. He might be able to just stay on the outside and pick Danaa Batgerel apart. He may just be the more technical kickboxer. But we know that Batgerel's got that big power, and you really wanted to see Brandon Davis extend him in his last fight, and it just didn't happen. Batgerel just landed, and he did what he does. He put him out. So it's kind of hard to play Chris Gutierrez with any confidence. But at the same time, I feel the same way about Danaa Batgerel. You would hope that he goes out there and gets the knockout, but if he doesn't, and the body language doesn't look great going into rounds 2 and 3, he might end up losing a real close decision. We know that Chris Gutierrez is in close fights all the time. A lot of split decisions, a lot of unanimous decisions on his record. So you know that he's allowing fights to go long and that they're competitive. But at the same time, I mean, somebody who is able to survive fights like that time and time again, they're kind of tricky to put away. That there's a reason why they go the distance so often. The more you build lineups, the more you're going to realize that any way you slice it, you're probably going to end up playing 3 of these people down here. Now, here's a way that you can build your lineups and get away with not having to play so many underdogs. You could take somebody like Blaydes, Latifi, Bryan Barberena, You got David Dvorak, Danaa Batgerel, and then Joanne Wood. Now, this doesn't give you the option to switch out between Bryan Barberena and Matt Brown, but this is likely what you would have to do if you don't want to play so many of the underdogs on this card. Now, if you did want to go the other way with the Matthews Nicolau fight, now you've got 700 left on the table and you can make some moves from there. This is a situation where I would recommend either going up to Khizriev, because again, that first round upside is it's just hard to want to get away from that when you know that a lot of these fights are probably going to go the distance. And if you wanted to tinker with this just a bit and you come off of Khizriev, you go down to Karol Rosa, which opens up the option for you to go with either Matt Brown or Bryan Barberena. I talked myself into Matt Brown. He was on the thumbnail. Ohio, stand up. And I think a lot of people are going to move off of Danaa Batgerel and probably plug in Borschev if they have the option to. But again, I don't really like Borschev in his matchup. I think that he's going to win, but I think his ceiling is a little limited. I think Batgerel has a better matchup against a relatively short notice Chris Gutierrez. But if you want to say screw it and you take these guys out and you want to come down to Kai Kara France just to see again what we could do, you can even afford Manon Fior, Khizriev. You can really do anything. And here's another route you can go if you want to really go against the grain and show that you have the biggest brain in the world. You could go with somebody like Neil Magny, Ilir Latifi, Joe Wood. You've got Borschev, Matt Brown, Danaa Batgerel. There's knockout upside here, here, and here. Less so with Ilir Latifi. You really like the output of Joanne Wood, who is fully capable of scoring over 100 points in a decision. And Mangela Hill is probably looking at around a 60 to 70 point, maybe even the 80 point performance this week, but just a very safe bet. And now I'll finish off by quickly giving you what I think is going to happen in each fight, as well as who I think is going to win each fight. And before I do, in the description is going to be a link to my Twitter. I just made it so that we can complain during the fights. Feel free to follow me there, talk a little trash, do whatever you want. But I'm also going to be tweeting out some parlays that I like for you guys. I'll probably put some in the comments as well, but I'll tweet out a couple of parlays, like 3, 4, maybe 5 leggers with decent plus numbers for you. But normally a few of you ask for it in the comments, I give it to you, and more often than not, these parlays do come through. So I'm going to put that on Twitter for you as well. Make sure you follow for the tweets. But from the top down, I have Curtis Blaydes by TKO. I think it's going to come in like the 3rd or the 4th round. Joanne Wood by decision. I hate to say this, but Matt Brown by knockout in the 1st round. I think Askarov by decision is probably the most likely outcome in this fight. Ilir Latifi by decision, Viacheslav Borschev by decision, Neil Magny by decision, Karol Rosa by decision, Danaa Batgerel by TKO, Aliaskhab Khizriev by knockout in the 1st round, Manon Fior by decision, Mateusz Nicolau by decision, Luis Saldana by decision. If you've gotten to this point in the video, thank you so much for watching. I really, really do appreciate it. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel. That way I can bring more of this to you.